There are nights when I realize something is wrong again. Not suddenly, not loudly. It arrives quietly as a weight in the chest, as a tiredness that sleep doesn't touch. I sit there and think, I've felt this before. Different place, different face, same feeling. And that's when the truth starts whispering, not as a thought, but as a memory in the body. We didn't stumble into this moment by accident. We returned to it. Because some pain doesn't scare us. Some pain feels familiar, and familiarity can feel like safety when it's all we knew. That's how toxic cycles survive, not because we are weak, not because we don't know better, but because part of us still believes that if we stay long enough, endure quietly enough, love hard enough, the ending will finally change. Understood? For a long time, we believed toxic cycles were about other people. The abusive partner, the emotionally unavailable parent, the manipulative boss, the friend who took more than they gave. It felt easier that way, cleaner. If the problem lived outside us, then we were just unlucky. But slowly, almost reluctantly, we began to notice something else. The faces changed, but the feeling didn't. Different relationships, different environments, same emotional weight in the chest, same exhaustion, same quiet self-betrayal. That's when it became impossible to ignore. The cycle wasn't chasing us. We were carrying it. Long before we had words for what was happening, our nervous system was already learning. Before logic, before memory, before choice. It learned what love felt like. It learned what attention cost. It learned what version of ourselves kept people close. This learning didn't come from conversations. It came from moments. From watching moods change without warning. From sensing when it was safe to speak and when it wasn't. From realizing that affection sometimes arrived only after we behaved a certain way. Some of us learned that love was unpredictable. Warm one moment, distant the next. So our bodies learned to stay alert, to scan, to wait. Some of us learned that closeness came with fear. That being seen could also mean being hurt. So we learned to stay halfway hidden. Some of us learned that being needed mattered more than being known. That usefulness created security. So we learned to overgive before anyone could ask. None of this was conscious. It didn't sound like thoughts. It fell over time. Instinct became identity. We didn't decide to become this way. We adapted. The nervous system doesn't care about truth. It cares about survival. If love came with tension, tension became familiar. If affection followed obedience, obedience became safety. If silence followed honesty, silence became protection. And slowly an emotional blueprint formed. Not logically, not intentionally, but somatically, in the body, in the reflexes. That blueprint now runs quietly in the background of our lives. It determines what feels attractive, what feels boring, what feels threatening, what feels like home. And here's the painful part: the blueprint doesn't update itself just because time passes. We can leave the house, leave the relationship, leave the job. But if the pattern hasn't been seen, we recreate it. Different setting, same role. We don't choose it because we want pain. We choose it because the body recognizes it, and recognition feels like safety, even when it hurts. That's why breaking a cycle feels disorienting. It's not just change, it's identity disruption. Because if we stop being the one who waits, who fixes, who endures, who are we then? This is why awareness hurts before it heals. Seeing the cycle means realizing we weren't cursed, we were conditioned. And conditioning can be unlearned, but not without grief. Grief for the child who learned these rules too early. Grief for the years spent repeating them unconsciously. We didn't choose this blueprint, but we live inside it. Until we don't. This is where most of us turn away. Because this truth is uncomfortable. Desire is not always wisdom. Sometimes desire is memory wearing longing's face. We like to believe that what we want must be right for us. That attraction means alignment. That chemistry means truth. But if we're honest, we've wanted things that slowly hollowed us out. People who couldn't meet us. Situations that demanded we shrink. Connections that felt intense but never safe. And still, we wanted them, not casually, deeply. That's when the real question begins to surface. Why? The answer isn't weakness, it isn't self-sabotage, it's familiarity. We don't fall in love the way movies suggest. We fall into emotional gravity. Something about certain people pulls us in, not because they're good for us, but because they resonate with an old internal rhythm. They feel known, even when they're distant, even when they're inconsistent, even when they hurt us. Especially then, because somewhere inside, the nervous system whispers, I know this. We are drawn to people who recreate the emotional conditions of our early life, not the events, the feeling, the waiting, the uncertainty, the hope mixed with fear. This isn't conscious, it's neurological. The psyche is trying to resolve something unfinished. This is repetition compulsion, the unconscious belief that if we replay the pattern enough times, the ending will finally change. This time they'll stay. This time they'll choose us. This time will be enough. But the part of us asking for that ending is not adult. It's younger. It's the part that learned early that love required effort. That closeness had to be earned. That being chosen wasn't guaranteed. That child is still waiting for closure from a world that no longer exists. And every time we confuse longing with love, we reopen the wound. We call it chemistry, but it's anxiety. We call it passion, but it's activation. We call it fate, but it's familiarity. Peace doesn't spark desire at first. It feels dull, flat, because the nervous system equates calm with absence. When chaos was normalized early on, stillness feels unfamiliar, even unsafe. So we go back to what hurts, not because we enjoy pain, but because pain feels alive, and aliveness feels like connection. This is why logic doesn't break the cycle. We can know better and still choose the same, because desire doesn't respond to information, it responds to memory. Healing doesn't mean suppressing desire, it means understanding it, listening to what it's really asking for, not the person, not the relationship, but the feeling of finally being chosen, finally being safe, finally being enough. Until that need is met internally, desire will keep pointing outward. And every repetition without awareness deepens the pattern. But awareness changes everything. Because once we see that longing is grief in disguise, we stop obeying it blindly. Very slowly, desire begins to change. Not because we forced it, but because we healed what was asking to be replayed. Not an idea, not a concept. A person whose life unfolded quietly, the way most pain does. Her name doesn't matter. What matters is how familiar her story feels. She grew up in a home where love existed, but it wasn't steady. No shouting, no obvious cruelty, just absence where warmth should have been. Her father was physically present, but emotionally elsewhere. He wasn't harsh. He just didn't arrive all the way. When he noticed her, it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, brief, warm, rare. When he withdrew, she didn't question him. She questioned herself. Children don't assume adults are limited. They assume they are, so she adapted. She became quieter, more helpful, easier to be around. She learned early that asking for too much created distance, that expressing disappointment closed doors, that being low maintenance kept people close. This wasn't a decision, it was survival. And it worked at first. People liked her. They relied on her. They stayed. But they never fully saw her. As she grew older, this pattern followed her like a shadow. Teachers praised her for being easy. Friends leaned on her. She rarely leaned back. By the time she reached adulthood, she had mastered one thing perfectly: how to be needed without being held. Then she met him. He was intelligent, magnetic, emotionally complex. He listened just enough to feel close, then pulled away just enough to keep her waiting. He wasn't cruel. He didn't insult or control. He was simply unavailable. And for reasons she couldn't explain, he felt familiar. His distance didn't scare her, it activated her. Every small moment of attention felt amplified. Every delay felt personal. She found herself watching her phone, replaying conversations, adjusting her tone, not because she lacked self-worth, but because her body recognized the rhythm. This was the same emotional climate she had learned to survive in long ago. He never fully committed, but he never fully left, and she stayed in that between space for far longer than she intended. Not because she believed the situation was healthy. She knew it wasn't, but knowing didn't change the pull. Each unanswered message felt like childhood all over again. Each sudden moment of warmth felt like hope returning. She wasn't addicted to him. She was attached to the possibility that this time, the distant one would finally stay. That this time, love wouldn't disappear. And every time she almost left, something stopped her. A thought she couldn't quite name. If I stay a little longer, if I'm patient enough, if I don't ask for too much. This wasn't weakness. Her nervous system had learned that closeness required endurance. That love arrived intermittently. That staying quiet was safer than being honest. So she waited, and waiting felt familiar. The cost didn't appear all at once. It accumulated slowly. She became tired, then anxious, then unsure of her own needs. She began minimizing her feelings before anyone else could, convincing herself that this was normal, that relationships were supposed to hurt sometimes. The moment that changed everything wasn't dramatic. There was no final argument, no betrayal. Just a quiet realization: one night she felt lonelier with him than without him, and that truth landed in her body before it reached her mind. It felt heavy, clear, unavoidable. Leaving didn't feel empowering. It felt empty, but emptiness was honest, and honesty was new. That was the beginning, not of a perfect life, but of a different one where love no longer had to be earned through silence, one where familiar pain stopped masquerading as home. But if we slow down, we notice something else. We've wanted people who diminished us. Situations that required self-erasure, connections that felt electric but never safe, and still, we leaned toward them, not lightly, with devotion. The question isn't, what's wrong with us? The question is, what feels familiar? We don't fall in love the way stories suggest. We fall into emotional gravity. Certain people resonate with an old internal frequency. They feel known, even when they are inconsistent, even when they withhold, even when they hurt us. Especially then, because somewhere beneath thought, the body says, I recognize this rhythm. We aren't recreating events. We're recreating sensations, the waiting, the uncertainty, the hope suspended in fear. This isn't a flaw. It's the psyche attempting to complete something unfinished. An unconscious hope that repetition will finally lead to resolution. This time they'll stay. This time we'll be chosen. This time will be enough. But the part asking for that ending is young. It learned early that love had conditions. That closeness was earned. That being chosen was never guaranteed. That part is still waiting for a conclusion that never came. And every time longing is mistaken for love, the wound reopens. We call it passion, but it's activation. We call it fate, but it's familiarity. We call it chemistry, but it's anxiety. Peace rarely feels exciting at first. It feels empty, flat, unstimulating. Because when chaos was normal, calm feels foreign. So we return to intensity, not for pleasure but for aliveness. Pain keeps us awake, and aliveness feels like connection. This is why logic alone cannot free us. We can understand everything and still repeat it. Because desire answers memory, not reason. Healing isn't about rejecting desire. It's about listening beneath it. What is this longing really asking for? Not the person, not the story, but safety, consistency, rest. Until those needs are met internally, desire will continue pointing outward. But awareness interrupts the loop. Because once we recognize longing as grief, it loses its authority. And slowly, without force, desire evolves. Not through discipline, through repair. And then there is the story. Not symbolic, not theoretical, a life that unfolded quietly. She grew up in a home where love existed, but stability did not. No explosions, no cruelty that could be named, just emotional absence. Her father was there, but distant, not unkind, just unreachable. When his attention landed on her, it felt radiant, brief, rare. When it vanished, she searched herself for the reason. Children don't assume caregivers are limited, they assume they are. So she adjusted. She became agreeable, low maintenance, easy to keep. She learned that asking too much created space. That disappointment closed doors. That being uncomplicated preserved connection. This wasn't strategy, it was survival. And it worked. People appreciated her, depended on her, stayed close. But they didn't truly meet her. By adulthood, she had perfected a single skill being needed without being held. Then she met someone familiar, brilliant, distant, emotionally complex, present just enough to create closeness, absent enough to sustain longing. He wasn't abusive, he was unavailable, and her body recognized him instantly. Not comfort, activation. Every message mattered, every silence echoed. She monitored herself, adjusted herself, waited. Not from lack of worth, from recognition. This was the emotional weather she had learned to survive. He hovered, never committing, never leaving, and she remained suspended. Not because she believed it was healthy, but because understanding didn't loosen the pull. Each absence reopened something old. Each moment of warmth reignited hope. She wasn't attached to him. She was attached to the idea that this time the distance wouldn't win. Leaving didn't arrive with triumph. It arrived with emptiness. The noise stopped. The tension dissolved. And without it, she didn't feel free. She felt exposed. Cycles don't end in celebration, they end in silence. And silence reveals everything we avoided. The body misses the stress before the mind understands why. Because chaos had structure, waiting had purpose, calm required presence. And presence was terrifying. But she stayed. She didn't recreate the pain. She let the quiet remain. And slowly, not joy, not confidence, something steadier formed. Integrity. A sense of no longer bargaining for worth. A realization that love doesn't require anxiety. That peace doesn't have to be earned. The cycle didn't end beautifully. When it finally ended, it didn't feel like relief. It felt empty. The chaos was gone, but so was the noise that kept us distracted. The phone stayed silent. No tension, no waiting, no emotional guessing games. And instead of feeling free, we felt exposed. That's something no one warns us about. We think breaking a cycle will feel powerful, like strength, like clarity. But most of the time, it feels like loss. Not just of people, but of identity. For years, struggle gave our days meaning. Anxiety told us we were attached. Effort made us feel worthy. Without it, we didn't know who we were supposed to be. The body missed the stress before the mind could understand why. It reached for familiar pain out of habit, not because it was good, but because it was known. We had learned how to survive that version of love. We had rules for it. Silence had patterns. Disappointment had structure. Calm didn't. Calm felt unsafe because it asked something different from us. It asked us to sit still, to stop proving, to stop waiting, to stop earning. and sitting with ourselves was harder than enduring someone else. Old memories started surfacing once the noise disappeared. Times we ignored our own discomfort. Moments we explained away because leaving felt too dangerous. We saw ourselves clearly for the first time, and that honesty hurt more than the relationship ever did. There was shame in that clarity, not loud shame, quiet shame. The kind that asks why we stayed, why we tolerated so little, why we kept hoping when the pattern was already written. But that shame wasn't truth, it was grief trying to speak. We weren't weak, we were afraid of being alone, afraid of losing connection, afraid that without struggle nothing would hold us together. The cycle gave us purpose, it told us what to do every day: fix, wait, adjust, endure. Letting it go felt like stepping into a life without instructions. That's why the ending felt dark. Not because something bad happened, but because something familiar ended. And the part of us that learned to survive that familiarity didn't leave quietly. It resisted, it mourned, it panicked. But we stayed, we didn't run back. We didn't recreate the chaos just to feel something again. We stayed with the discomfort, with the quiet, with the strange feeling of not being needed in the old way, and slowly something changed. Not happiness, not confidence, integrity. A sense that we were no longer negotiating our worth. A realization that love doesn't require anxiety to exist. That effort doesn't equal value. That peace doesn't have to be earned. The cycle didn't end with joy, it ended with truth. And for the first time, that truth didn't cost us ourselves.